Welcome to the Macdownunder Podcast for all Australian Apple computer enthusiasts and collectors.
Welcome to episode 36 of the Macdownunder Podcast. I'm Justin, and thanks for joining me today, the 1st of April 2026, being the 50th anniversary of the Apple Computer Company. As most of you will know, I suspect, 50 years ago, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak and Ronald Wayne formed the Apple Computer Company on this day, the 1st of April in 1976, largely to sell the recently completed Apple Computer 1 designed by Steve Wozniak and demonstrated only that month in March to the homebrew computer company. So only a few months later in July, the Apple Computer 1 went on sale for $666.66. That sounds a bit demonic, but according to Woz, he just liked repeating numbers. So it's $666, but importantly, the extra 66 cents. Now, apparently that would have been around $600 Australian at the time, because of course the Australian dollar hadn't been floated at that point, so it was quite strong. And that would equate to about $4,760 in today's Australian money. Now that's pretty expensive for a hobbyist level populated motherboard without a power board, keyboard, case or monitor. Now here's my replica, and I'll show you a photo close up in a moment, but it pretty much was a bare board motherboard with some chips, the capacitors and so forth, but no power supply. You needed to plug that in yourself. No keyboard, you needed to source that and plug that in yourself. No monitor, again, you need to make your own cable, source your monitor and plug that in yourself. And eventually there were expansion cards to provide other forms of input and output, like cassette tape, which we spoke about not long ago. But pretty expensive bare board hobbyist machine with no proven track record at that point. Of course, this was followed up in 1977 with the Apple II. An enormously iconic computer, went on to make Apple Computer millions of dollars, and the rest, as they say, is history. Not that it was a smooth ride for most of that history, particularly in the mid-90s, but here we are today. So today, on this episode, we're going to continue our journey through Apple's external storage devices. The Apple floppy disk episodes and the hard drive episode were really popular, so I hope you enjoyed them as much as I did in making them. Today though, we're going to focus on other attached external storage devices that Apple produced. We'll also cover regular collecting news, coming events, and some for sale finds. So on to today's episode. So the first device that I'm going to talk about is the Apple Tape Backup 40SC, introduced in 1987. And as you can see, use the same snow white form factor with the grooves and so forth as we spoke about with the 20SC, 40SC and other SCSI hard drives in the last week's episode. The main difference in the design, of course, is now we've got this chin, very reminiscent of particularly the Mac SE with the grooves running vertically, but also the Mac 2, the Laser Writer 2 and the One scanners. Now, this was introduced primarily for the Mac Plus, the Mac SE and the Mac 2 for large capacity backup. It was platinum in colour, talked about the chin. It does have a front eject button that is there for the tape drive. On the rear, again, like all the other SCSI devices, we've got our power supply on off switch, we've got our two Centronics interfaces for the SCSI, and of course the SCSI identifier with a pinhole to change the number. So, the all-important recording media. So it used the industry standard DC-2000, which was a 1/4-inch tape using the 1/4-inch cartridge system that was introduced by 3M. Its formatted capacity was 38.5 megabytes, so not quite the 40, and the transfer rate was about 1.25 megabytes per second. So it took about 20 minutes to update or back up a 20 meg hard drive like the 20SC. Now it came with its own software, so the SC software revision 2.01, but eventually it became bundled with other commercial products like retrospect backup. And it was also useful with the tape backup archiving system that was built into AUX, the Apple Unix operating system. It wasn't officially supported by System 7, but I do believe people have got it to work. It wasn't supported by the PowerPC chips when they came out, and there's no easily found, I couldn't find any documentation about it supporting in the Apple II, and the Apple III and Lisa, of course, didn't have SCSI out of the box. It was discontinued in 1994. So next up, in 1988, Apple released the Apple CD-SC, their first CD-ROM device. Now, this used a caddy system. Here's an example of a caddy, which you basically opened, inserted your CD, and then inserted into the caddy load slot. There we go, that's where it is. Now, in this particular model, the caddy load slot, as you can see, had no trap door. So you loaded directly into the mechanism. Again, it was a laser inside, clean optical required, but there was no trap door. In addition, this particular model originally got shipped with a fan because they believed it needed a fan like the 20SC hard drive did. But in fact, what happened is it sucked in so much dirt, it tended to interfere with the optics, combined with the fact that there was no trapdoor, not a great combination. So the later models removed the fan. So this used the original CD-ROM definition. So it came with the capacity to read 650 megabyte CD-ROMs, read-only of course. In 5 formats: CD-ROM audio, CD-ROM data, the hierarchical file system, ProDOS, so it can be used on an Apple II, and High Sierra. On the front of the device, as we've seen before, we've got a number of controls. And again, we've got the Snow White design language, so matching the tape backup 40SC and the Mac SE and so forth. So on the front, we have the eject button, we have an audio jack, and we've got the volume button so that you can access the CD-ROM for audio. Again, we've got an eject pin, which sadly only works when the thing is powered in this case, and you'll see the next product, there's a bit of a glitch, and of course the opening for our CD-ROM caddy. On the back, same as we've seen before, power switch, power supply, we've got our two 50-pin Centronics interfaces, we've got our SCSI ID selector, but now we've also got audio out and also a ground pin. So that's our Apple CD-SC introduced in 1988. So in 1991, Apple released the updated Apple CD-SC Plus. So what are the key differences? Well, we've now got we're still using the caddy, and you can see we've got a caddy stuck in this particular device. We're still using the caddy, but the mechanism now has been upgraded and can now read 750 megabyte CD-ROMs. The only other real change is the label. So on the bottom, it reads that that's now the Apple CD-SC Plus. Otherwise, on the back, we've still got the 250-pin Centronics, still got the audio and the ground pin, ID selector, etc. And on the front, we've still got our eject button, our audio jack, and our volume control. The main difference being the mechanism itself being a trapdoor caddy load capable of reading 750 megabyte CD-ROMs. The next model up was the Apple CD-150. In a different enclosure, no longer using the Snow White design language that could sit underneath your compact Mac. This one was really for sitting alongside whatever Apple computer you had at the time. Still using the caddy design, and again, I've got a caddy stuck in this one, so there's some maintenance required for it, but in this new enclosure. So now on the front, we've got the CD-ROM directly available to us. Of course, we've got the audio, we've got the volume control, an access light, and our eject button. Of course, ubiquitous Apple logo. On the rear, not too much different to the previous models. Still got our power supply, still got a ground pin and audio, and our SCSI ID and change selection available. And on the bottom, of course, Apple CD-150. Now, this was replaced soon after. However, this was the last single speed CD-ROM that Apple produced. So everything to date was single speed CD. So Apple then released the Apple CD 300 in the same enclosure. Looks identical. This one, of course, doesn't have a caddy stuck in it. That's the only difference at the front. And no difference at the back. All the same configuration. Of course, on the bottom, it reflects that it is an Apple CD 300, but the big difference is that this was a double speed, a by 2 CD-ROM that was introduced in 1992. Now, there's a suggestion online in a couple of different places that there was an Apple CD 300 Plus in this style of case, but with a tray load. Now, I've seen references to it on the wiki page. It refers to an Apple of Denver page, which actually doesn't talk about that device at all. It talks about the internal version, not the external version. So I've been looking for quite a while. If you've got any leads on an Apple CD 300 Plus in this enclosure with the Apple enclosure on either side of the CD, please let me know. I'd love to get photos or an option to purchase one. A little while later, Apple updated their enclosures again. So this one is the Apple CD 300E for external Plus. The main difference, as you can see, it's got the tray-loaded double-speed CD-ROM. So that's why it's a 300 Plus. But it's in an external enclosure, again, an update from the previous model. So on the front, we've got pretty much the same controls as you'd expect, except interestingly, we've now got an Apple logo actually on the CD mechanism itself. On the rear, again, we've got our 250 pin Centronics interfaces. We've got our Apple ID changer. We've got audio and a ground pin, plus of course the power supply. And on the bottom, of course, we have the Apple CD 300E Plus plate. So this was the double speed device in the new form factor. Slightly taller, I think, to accommodate the tray load. Then we got the final model in this series, the 600E. So this is the Apple CD 600E. This is now a 4-speed, 4-time CD-ROM, still read-only. In the same enclosure, again with the Apple logo on the CD-ROM itself. Otherwise, the enclosure is the same, and of course the label on the bottom is Apple 600E. So that was the fastest external CD-ROM that Apple produced. Of course, you will find faster online because people can swap the mechanisms around, and you can do that. But in terms of the Apple product, this was the fastest external enclosure that they produced. Now in 1993, Apple released the Power CD. Quite an amazing looking device. I've always loved it. Now this particular device was designed in the Apple Design Group, and in particular the Mac-like Things division. Now you might remember we've spoken about them. They only produced 2 products, the Power CD and the Apple Design speakers. And the second version of that had a black set of speakers that matched this Power CD quite nicely. I guess the most obvious thing about the Power CD player is that it's a vertical load CD mechanism. It's also perfect for leaving standalone on top of your TV and or stereo because it's got all of the play controls, the eject button, everything can be taken care on the unit itself. It's even got an LCD to display its current status, the track playing, etc. In addition to that, it came with this amazing remote control with many, many more functions than you can access on the front of the Power CD itself. Now, the idea was that this particular CD player would be a personal CD player that you take with you and should be quite portable. Except that it comes with this rather large backpack that provides not only the power input or optional batteries, but also the 50-pin SCSI port, noticing that you can't daisy chain this, and the ID selector. So if you wanted this to be portable, you had to take this backpack with you. If you took it off, all you were left with was this 25-pin adapter and a AV port for this quite peculiar cable that fits into the port and provides you with the stereo and video output cables. But pretty much without the backpack, you couldn't do much with your Power CD. Now, inside, this is a 4-speed CD-ROM, capable of all the usual CD-ROM file types, but in particular, the codec photo CD protocol, which meant that you could connect this up to your TV and scroll through your Kodak CDs full of Kodak photos. Of course, that didn't end up making a big splash in the market, but if you had some, you could read them with your Power CD. Now, the general consensus is this is actually a rebadged Philips designed Philips CDF 100. And there's also a very similar Kodak product, the Kodak PDC 880. They all look identical. And it is believed it's actually a Philips product that's been rebadged. There is a little bit of dissension though. Some people suggest it's an NEC mechanism. It may well have been manufactured by NEC on license. So use and maintenance. All of these devices we've spoken about so far are small computer systems interface, SCSI interface devices. So they'll work on any Mac that's got a SCSI interface, provided you've got the right drivers. But being Apple devices, they're all available. In fact, things like the Power CD have their own unique desk accessories to control all of their functions directly. In terms of the Apple II, the CD-ROM drives actually will work on an Apple II GS quite well. Again, you do need the right software, and you can use them also under ProDOS 8, but again, you need the right drivers. That doesn't apply for the Tape CD or the Power CD, they won't work. In terms of maintenance, the early devices, of course, suffer from brittle plastics, so you do need to be careful about the case management and yellowing and so forth in those. All of these SCSI devices are at the time in their life when they're going to need recapping. So not only on the power supply circuit boards in the cases, but also the circuit boards on the CD-ROM drives themselves. Now, Bruce from Brankus Creations has got some great videos, and I'll put links down in the description. Other issues you're going to find, for example, with the Tape Backup 40SC, is that the rollers start to deteriorate, the drive bands and so forth. And in fact, one of the known issues with the heads on the tape backup unit is that they do tend to corrode and even rust. In fact, there's a bit of rust on mine. But the same goes for the CD-ROMs. You just need to check that their drive mechanisms are working as you would expect. Fast forward to 2008, and released alongside the MacBook Air is the SuperDrive. Now, where have I heard that name before? There was in fact the 3.5-inch floppy disk drive SuperDrive that we spoke about a couple of episodes ago. But sometime later, they've reused the name for this device. Now, this was both a CD-ROM that could read and write CD-ROMs and a DVD player that could read and write DVDs. Sadly, the name Super didn't extend to Blu-ray. So, released in the brushed aluminium to match the MacBook and most other Apple products at the time, the SuperDrive comes with minimal connections. It comes with the single USB connection. There's no hub. The only other thing really is the slot for the CD-ROM or DVD-ROM. There's not even an eject button. The SuperDrive must be plugged in to a Mac directly. Now, I've come a cropper with this a few times, and there's a couple of issues if you try using it with a hub. Even with an external display, it can draw a lot of power. In fact, in my case, I had a CD-ROM that actually Matt from the MAC Museum had given me to play with. When I inserted it into the super drive connected to my Thunderbolt display, it crashed the system and my Mac Mini would reboot. However, the same configuration, the same power, I can burn CD-ROMs. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with the firmware, but it clearly doesn't like some titles. Not even connected directly to my Mac Mini. And of course, when I got the disk stuck, then there's no mechanism to get it out. Basically, I had to hold down the eject button as I rebooted my Mac Mini to get it to eject the disk before it actually completed the boot sequence. The new Apple SuperDrive was delisted from the Apple website in 2025. Now, there is one more ring-in that I'd like to add in today's discussion in the spirit of Apple's other attached external storage devices. This is the Pippin floppy drive. So I forgot to mention it a couple of episodes ago, which is my bad, but it is a super drive, but it's the 3.5-inch floppy disk version of the super drive in a special form factor, particularly for the Pippin. So we've got our floppy disk slot, we've got our direct eject pinhole, nothing on the back other than the clamp for it to connect to the Pippin, and nothing on the base. However, what we do have on the top is the PCI connector that plugs directly into the base of your Bandai Pippin. So very much like the Jonathan concept that Apple and Frog Design had been working on, the idea with some of these devices for the Pippin was that you could stack them connecting up to the Pippin CPU. And in this case, this was I think the only external device released by Bandai. There were other devices, as I mentioned in the Pippin episode a few months ago. Now, this particular model came with my developer's Pippin, so there's no markings on it at all. So obviously this one's a pretty early example. Now, we've finally covered off almost all of Apple's external attached storage devices. So, what do you think? Have you got any? How many have you got? Are you still using them? I'd love to hear from you. Please let me know down in the comments. And on to recent news. And being Apple's 50th anniversary today, it would be remiss of me if I didn't talk about the Sydney Apple event to celebrate that was held last week. Here's the Macworld article linked down in the description. There's also a great article in the Information Age section of the Australian Computer Society magazine. Links down in the description. It's great to see a number of Australian Apple enthusiasts mentioned and quoted through the article, in particular friend of the show Matt from the MAC Museum, and also Adrian from Adrian's Apple Arc, which is a great segue because Adrian has announced episode 1 of a podcast featuring the story of Adrian's Apple Arc. So released just after midnight on April 1st. I'm hoping it's not a joke. I'm looking forward to future episodes. Sad news this week that the Canberra Vintage Computer Festival won't be held this year. I'm really glad that I made the effort to get there last year. It was a fantastic event. Now, I understand the organisers are looking at how they can run the event in the future, every 2 or maybe 3 years, or potentially hosting it in another jurisdiction. I hope those plans come off. I'm happy to get involved if it's here in Melbourne, but I'm certainly looking forward to going to the next one, wherever it may be. Finishing up on some good news, I mentioned last week that the 68K Macintosh Liberation Army forums had been down for a few days. Well, they were restored last Saturday. I'm sure to everybody and the administrators' relief. If you want to see what happened, there's a link down in the description so you can have a read. But I'm glad they're back up. That's a fantastic resource. Go and check it out. On to coming events. Retro Gaming Bendigo. Gee, I tell you what, you've got to be quick. They've updated their website from the time I actually recorded this to the time I'm editing. So here's the new information. Sunday, the 26th of April is their next meeting in their new venue at the Huntley Memorial Hall, 12:30 for a 1 o'clock start. Links down in the description. Check out the website for future information. WasFest. Their next meeting is scheduled for the 23rd of May 2026. Again, this is held in a private house, so have a look at the link down in the description and reach out to the organisers for details. The MAC Museum have their next open day on April the 18th from 10 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Somerville, Victoria. Check out the link in the description. I got down there last weekend. It was great to catch up with Matt, his family that help out at the venue, and Declan who came in to say hello as well. Technology Markets have their next market on Sunday the 12th of April at the Darebin Community Sports Stadium in Reservoir. And then the following Sunday the 19th of April, they're holding one at the Springers Leisure Centre in Keysborough. Links down in the description. The Adelaide Retro Computing Group have their next meeting on Friday the 10th of April from 5:30 until 10:30 p.m. in the usual place at the Unley Community Centre. Check the link down in the description. Now, if you've got a retro computing event, particularly if it involves an Apple product, please reach out and let me know. I'd be more than happy to promote it and add it to our list. Time for this week's for sale items. And this week, of course, I've been looking for examples of those other external storage devices we've discussed. Hard to find in Australia, I've got to say, so I did have to look in the US again. But first up, the Apple USB SuperDrive external optical drive. That's the aluminium version, the DVD one, not the 3.5-inch SuperDrive. So there's lots of these available. This is the cheapest one I found online so far, currently at $10.49 in box, admittedly untested, but a few days to go at auction. Next up, a friend of the show over in WA has the Apple Power CD and the matching speakers with the Power CD in box with all the accessories, just like the one I showed you here. Today it's at $132.50. There's still some time to go, but both those speakers and the Power CD are very collectible, so watch out for this one. Next up, I had to look far and wide for this, but there is a vintage Apple CD-SC, the original CD-ROM drive, available from the US for $57 US, comes in at around 84 Australian dollars plus $112 shipping. Next up, the Apple CD300, the caddy drive version. This comes in at 82 US dollars, about 120 Australian dollars at the moment, plus another $41 shipping. Well, that brings us to the end of episode 36 of the Macdownunder Podcast. On today, April 1st, 2026, the 50th anniversary of Apple Computer Company. Congratulations, Apple. Well done. I look forward to the next 50. It also brings to the end our series on Apple's external storage devices. So, what did you think? Let me know down in the comments. If you've got any suggestions for future episodes, again, let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. Don't forget to put in your diary that the Mac Museum's open on the 18th of April. Come and visit. And until I see you next time, take care. Thank you for joining the Macdownunder Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.